Hey legends, how you doing? This is Magnus. In this video, I'm reacting to just some guy's latest video, to Kevin Conroy, the one true Batman. So this is of course referencing to Kevin Conroy, the voice actor for the Batman of the Batman animated series. He also voiced Batman for, I believe, the Arkham games. So I actually haven't watched the Batman animated series or played the Arkham games, but I at least recognize the voice. So I um I'm saddened to hear of the man's passing. I hope he rests in peace, and I know I have my best wishes to all those who grew up with Kevin Conroy as the Batman they know and love. For example, comic book cast, Armin, when he made a video on it, um, he at one section of his video, he sounded almost like he was trying to hold back um, emotion or tears at one point. So let's see how Just Some Guy feels about it. Please comment, like, subscribe, share. Hope you enjoy. Let me drop a like. Let's get into it.
I remember when the Batman the Animated Series first aired. It came out on the heels of the very successful '89 movie. I remember thinking it looked so cool and retro at the same time. For some reason, it reminded me of downtown Chicago. I later found out why. It was the Art Deco design. It made the series feel like it was lost in time, with its 1920s aesthetic set in what appeared to be the modern world. And where the art design soared, so did the theme. The original song was composed by Danny Elfman. He later switched to Shirley Walker for the second season, and it just nailed the tone for the show. Most cartoon shows at the time would dial down the story and themes to simplify it for kids. This show didn't do that. It wasn't as serious as the film, but it wasn't pulling its punches either. It would handle some very difficult and touchy subject matter, presented it in a way that 8-year-olds could understand, and assumed that the audience was smart enough to follow. The tone was so PG that Fox decided to air it twice a day, once during the afternoon kids show block and later in prime time. That was the first time that I had ever seen a cartoon after 5 p.m. that wasn't a Christmas show. Now, as much as I love the Fox series, I think the show reached its pinnacle with the new Batman Adventures on WB. I still think about the episode Over the Edge at least once a month. There's so many great episodes. Of course, all that greatness hinged on Batman himself, Kevin Conroy. His performance is so good that you forget you're watching a kid show. It never felt like he was phoning it in. Batman came across as this conflicted man who's dedicated his life to stopping crime, but still hasn't dealt with his own pain. He has his dual personality, Bruce Wayne the Playboy and Batman the Dark Knight, but it's deeper than that. There's the Playboy, there's the Bat, and then there's the real Bruce hanging underneath. This is the type of thing people win Oscars for, and here Kevin Conroy was giving it away on a kids show. And you'd think over time he'd lose it, but no. His performance as Batman got better. Kevin was one of the reasons I was so excited about the Gotham Knight shorts when they came out. I knew the animation was going to be awesome, but to hear the real Batman voice again was perfection. When he came back for the Arkham and Injustice games, same thing. Half the reason I played those games was just to hear his voice. When I think of Batman, I only hear his voice. Doesn't matter what it is, a comic, a novel, even the films and other shows. No matter whether it's Michael Keaton, Val Kilmer, George Clooney, Christian Bale, Ben Affleck, or Robert Pattinson, I still hear Kevin Conroy's voice when I think of Batman. The only exception is Adam West. Everyone else is Kevin Conroy's voice. He will very much be missed. I actually didn't know what to do with myself after I found out he died. He'd recently been in the Crisis on Infinite Earths crossover a few years ago, and he looked old for being in his 60s, but that was about it. Apparently, he'd been sick for a while. At the time of making this, I still haven't seen anything stating what he died from. I don't think I'm ever going to be able to accept anyone else doing that voice. Kevin will forever be Batman to me, the same way Christopher Reeve is forever Superman. This is one of those times where I think we should just use our technology and save Kevin's voice. We have enough dialogue with him that AI should be able to copy his voice easily. Whenever there's a Batman show or game or anything that's not a person physically performing the character, we should just use his voice. The same thing goes for Majel Barrett from Star Trek. There is no reason why when I pick up my phone I shouldn't be able to say computer and hear her voice. That should be mandatory. Now, it's been interesting watching some of the responses to Conroy's passing because a number of the people praising him have spent the better part of a year calling people like him groomers. In case you didn't know, Conroy was gay. How many of them knew that and are just giving him a pass because of how beloved he is for his
Oh,
performance? Or if
I
they're
didn't
just
know that.
engaging in some cognitive dissonance? Who knows? I
Whoa.
mention this because back in June, Kevin Conroy wrote a piece for the annual DC Pride Month comic. I meant to review his story when the book came out, but it completely slipped my mind. I noticed virtually nobody else talked about the book either, although that's understandable. Most of the stories are terrible. Your average writer would never let those stories see the light of day. They would print them just to be able to burn them and then 7-pass erase them from their computers. I've ghosted them from my mind. I can't remember any of them except for one, Kevin Conroy's Finding Batman. Now, it says it's written by Conroy, but it could be ghostwritten. I'm going to assume he actually wrote it, mostly because it's really good, and that's rare for DC Comics these days. It's a very short 9-page memoir of his life and how he wound up with the role of Batman. Since Conroy's passing, DC decided to release it for free on their website, so if you want to read it, hop on over there. Kevin's story is one many gay men from his generation have told. He grew up in the 1950s and 60s in a chaotic religious home where he learned to hide who he was in order to fit in, all while having to deal with a schizophrenic brother, alcoholic father, and eventually his parents' divorce. Eventually, Kevin wanted out and turned to theater. However, he had no money, so he had to scrounge to get a scholarship to get into Juilliard, and that was where he fully developed his mask. Even though the theater is well known for its openly gay production side, being an openly gay actor in the 70s and 80s, especially for lead roles, was still a no-no. Conroy decided to try to keep two lives, the professional actor and the private gay man. However, that didn't last long. Eventually, word got out. Around that time, several of his fellow actors became sick. They would get these strange bruises and lesions, crippling pneumonia, and eventually die. The sickness moved quickly, affecting his friends, his agents, and actors he knew. A few years ago, I would have said it would have been difficult for younger millennials and Zoomers to understand what this was like, but I think the pandemic unfortunately taught them that lesson. As Kevin says in the comic, quote, a whole generation of men, my generation, was suddenly at risk of contracting what became known as AIDS. What had been unthinkable suddenly became my new reality. Conroy doesn't dwell on it, he doesn't have the pages to do it, but AIDS just obliterated gay men. And it was made worse by a certain group of people who thought gay men got what they deserved. If you're wondering who that group might have been, it's the same people calling them groomers today. Doctors refused to treat them. Religious leaders refused to visit them before they died. Funeral homes wouldn't take their bodies, and sometimes neither would graveyards. Just an entire generation of men tossed aside and forgotten. As this was happening around him, Kevin Conroy got another reality check when, for apparently no reason, one of his fellow actors spotted him at a lobby bar and decided to shout, "Hey, it's the faggot." This would have been in the mid-80s, so yeah, that would have been a thing that could have happened at the time. Instead of confronting the guy, Conroy left, figuring, quote, I would always be the other, no matter what I did. This is another thing that he doesn't dwell on, again because he doesn't have the pages, but it's worth remembering that at the time, if he stood up for himself, it could have cost him work. A few
Newest thing from Pizza Hut
Good
is
point.
it pizza.
Good point. That's a good point. All right. Well, let me
$6.99. In
years later, he worked on a film about a man slowly losing his mind. Conroy found the role challenging, partly because of the descent into madness, and partly because of how it would be filmed. Most films and shows are shot out of sequence, so he had to plan how this man's breakdown would happen, and then mark his script so he'd remember where he was mentally and physically for each scene. He did a great enough job that the producer wanted him for this buddy cop show. He said that he called Kevin if the network wanted to meet him. Kevin was planning on visiting his brother at the time, who was living in the old family home, so he had to delay that trip. Unfortunately, he never got a call back. Days went by, and he called and checked to see if he still needed to stay in the area, but nothing. While he waited, he visited a friend in the hospital who was dying of AIDS. The guy had written a script about his experiences, so Kevin and some friends decided to tell him that was going to go into production and that they needed him to direct it. They rehearsed it right there with him in the hospital, as if they were really going to put on the show. Eventually, Kevin decided to call the producer one more time before leaving to visit his brother, and guess who picked up the phone? The bigot from the bar. He launched into his usual slurs and let Kevin know that the network wanted nothing to do with him because of his sexuality. This left Conroy stunned. As he says, quote, I just sat there staring into space, staring into a void that spanned 20 years. 20 years since I moved to NYC as a 17-year-old to start my acting career at Juilliard. 20 years that I had been fooling myself that I could ever compete in this business, that I could have a public and private life. The 20 years I'd wasted thinking I could be anything more than just another faggot. Oh no, don't worry, it gets worse. When he visited his brother, he found the house in disarray and his brother passed out on the floor. When he woke his brother up, the man called him the same name. Something about that moment was different, cut deeper than before, and Kevin had had enough. He called
Of course it would. It's one thing if it comes from a stranger or a coworker that like you can pass off. But when it comes from a family member, from a sibling, from family, from a friend, that hurts hard. That cuts deep.
called the psych ward to have his brother admitted again. It was after all of this that he got the call to test for Batman. Bruce Timm, Andrea Romano, and Eric Rondowski talked him through the character, explaining how Bruce created dual personalities to deal with his parents' murder. Kevin gives this beautiful breakdown of how he considered the role, what it is to be Batman, to be torn between two identities. And he ends with this, quote, "It seemed to roar from 30 years of frustration, confusion, denial, love, yearning. Yearning for what? An anchor, a harbor, a sense of safety, a sense of identity. Yes, I can relate. Yes, this is terrain I know well. I felt Batman rising deep within. And we felt it too. Thank you for 30 years. Rest in peace. Rest in power, Kevin Conroy, the one and only Batman."
Agreed. Oh man, yeah. He did. Man, he didn't just speak Batman. He understood. Man, by the time, oh man, just hearing that, by the time they called him to test for Batman, he completely was in the mindset of Bruce Wayne. Oh my goodness. Again, I knew the only thing I knew about Kevin Conroy was that he was the voice actor for Batman of the animated series. That's all I knew. I did not know anything else from this. So wow. Anyway, thank you guys so much for watching. Thank you guys for getting me to 84 subscribers as of the recording of this video. How do you feel about Kevin Conroy and his passing? Of course, from my side, rest in peace. Comment, like, subscribe, share this video. I hope you enjoyed it. I'll see you in the next one. See you later.